Homework, page 76. Do we have questions about page 76? Number 5. Elena is not content with the progress she is making. To be satisfied with, to be content with, to be happy with uh, means that this thing makes you content, satisfied, happy. Other questions? No questions? Number 7. Have you decided on a date for your wedding yet? So decide has two options. You can say decide to do something, so that's a verb, or you can say you can decide on a noun. Other questions? No, because this unit is asking about prepositions. Sorry, number 9. But actually, Shuri, I should tell you, even if you add the word yet, you still need the preposition on. Yeah. Well, hang on. There's an exception. If it's not decided, if it's agreed, then traditionally you also need to say agree on. But today, this is one of those changing aspects of language. More and more people are using the word agree without on. So you can say, have we agreed a date? Number 9. Okay, so dream also has two options. To dream of means that this is something that you want. To dream about means this happened in your head last night. So here, this is a real, like literal dream in the nighttime. So it's dream about. Other questions? 11. To be innocent of. Same as guilty. To be guilty of. In. Oh, so if you see innocent plus in, the in does not go with innocent. It goes with something later. So for example, she was innocent in the eyes of the judge. It goes with in the eyes. Other questions? Number 14. Okay, compare also has two options. You can say compare to, or you can say compare with. There is a very slight difference. Compared to, if you compare A to B, you are using B as your standard, and you're seeing whether A matches that standard. If you say compare with, you're simply seeing what the similarities are. So for this question, you can say to or with. Both of them make sense. A word that is related to compare that you often see is contrast, right? Compare and contrast. Today, most people use compare to mean to think about the similarities and differences. But in fact, the word compare originally just meant similarities. If you want to compare differences, you would use the word contrast. And contrast goes with or to. Same principle. If you have one standard, it's to. If you're just comparing, it's with. Since we're talking about these words, we can add a few more facts. So contrast is pronounced differently as a verb and a noun. As a verb, it is contrast. As a noun, it is contrast. And then related to compare, you have the adjective comparable. This has two meanings. If you pronounce it like I just did, comparable, that means good or great. But if you pronounce it as comparable, then you mean able to be compared. Okay, so other questions about the homework? Okay, great. So this week, the final week before the exam, we are going to talk about mechanics. Mechanics are the parts of writing that are, how do I say this? They're less about your intention and more about your execution. So things like spelling, punctuation, uppercase or lowercase. You basically should know when to do what, but sometimes you write too fast and you make a mistake. Those are called typos or typographical errors. Okay, maybe this is a bit too big. That's also too big. Okay. So you might have seen this word before. A typo is a typographical error or mistake, which means you know it's wrong, but your hand slipped when you're typing and you didn't catch the mistake. In Chinese, we often say 打字错误. Okay, so I have prepared a PowerPoint for this, and it might seem similar. It might seem familiar. We did look at this PowerPoint in week 1. Right, mechanics, punctuation, and typing. This depends on noticing details. 要注意细节. So let's see if you can notice some details. This is the correct version. What's wrong with this one? Missing a comma, where? Here? Okay, where exactly? Before the quotation mark. Okay, what's wrong with this one? There's an extra space, 多一个空格. In Chinese, it doesn't matter, but in English, spaces are part of punctuation. 空白也是标点符号的一部分. Okay, next. So yeah, so it's there's an extra space. Okay, next. What's wrong with this one? Okay, don't kill me. Can you see the difference? This is two single quotation marks. 这是两个单引号。It should be one double quotation mark. 应该是一个双引号。Next. What's wrong with this one? We actually talked about this before. This is not an apostrophe. This is the minute mark. This is an apostrophe. It has to curve, 需要弯曲. If it's straight, it means minute. 它是分钟记号. Okay, what's wrong with this one? This should be one sentence, not two. Right? This is two sentences. This is one sentence. Okay, next. What's wrong with this one? The comma is wrong? This one? Okay, this one is correct. The mistake is somewhere else. Here? Correct. There is an extra space. Good job. As I said, spaces are part of punctuation. You have to learn to notice these things. Okay, what's wrong with this one? You see it? Okay, what is it? Good. There's an extra space here between the comma and the quotation mark. Okay, yeah, so that's the last one. So this is just to remind you that you do have to pay attention to details, especially for punctuation, because punctuation is so small. It's often easy to not catch those kinds of mistakes. So here we have a standard keyboard. I have marked a few keys that could be useful to know. For example, here we have the quotation mark. If you type this directly, it is a single quotation mark. But if you hold down Shift and then type it, it is a double quotation mark. I know it might seem obvious, but some people every year do not know this. So I want to remind you. If you need a double quotation mark, please hold down Shift and then type quote. Then we have the Tab key. If you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs and you need to indent, instead of hitting space, you can just hit Tab and it will move. It should be 1 inch or half an inch in. This is useful because spaces, you might type different numbers of spaces every time. You might forget how many spaces. And tab is useful for other things as well. So for example, if we have more than one line, If you put your cursor in the first line and you hit tab, the first line moves in. Okay. But if you need the whole thing to move in, you can put your cursor before another line and hit tab, and the whole thing moves in. So tab is a very useful key to know. And you can keep going, right? Depending on how far you need to move it. Okay, next we have this key. If you are typing on a tablet, you may not have this key. Um, when you need a smaller keyboard, these keys are often skipped, but it's a useful key to know. Can you see this? It says print screen system request. Okay, we don't use system request much anymore, but we do use print screen. Print screen is to take a screenshot. 截取荧幕. So if I type print screen right now, type, you don't see anything. But in fact, it has copied, I'll use Word, it has copied your screen onto your clipboard. And if you paste, ta-da, your screen. So if you need a fast screenshot, you can use print screen. On newer versions of Windows, I don't think this is the newest version that we're using, but on newer versions of Windows, when you type print screen, it will give you some options. Where do you want to select the image? How big? Which parts? But the only downside is you have to find a place to paste in the image. It won't save the image for you as an image file. Okay, this key over here, these are the brackets. So in English, we have three levels of brackets, right? The first level is the parenthesis. The second level is square brackets. And the third level is large brackets or curly brackets. In English grammar, we don't use these. This is usually for math and coding, but we do use these, and I will talk about this later. So to type square brackets, simply type the bracket key. And if you need large brackets, then you hold down Shift and then type the bracket key. Okay, one last thing I want to talk about. This key is the hyphen key. If you hold down Shift, it becomes the underscroll key. So this is a hyphen. This is an underscroll. If you need those, that's where they are. On the right, you have the minus key. Now, at first, the minus and the hyphen might look the same, but there is one key difference that I will point out later. So you do need to know where both of these keys are. They're not exactly the same. I think you probably know all of the other keys that you might need. In case you didn't know, if you need to refresh a page, like a web page, you can hit F5. If you need to close a window or close a program, you can hit Alt plus F4. If you need to open the right-click menu, instead of using the right click, you can type this key right next to Control. So this is my right click, and then if I type that key, same thing. If your mouse is broken, that's one way you can save it. Okay, do you have questions about the keyboard? I feel like I'm teaching computer class to grade school. Okay, so let's talk about some of those things I said I would explain. Hyphens and dashes. English actually has three kinds of symbols that look like a straight line. If you simply type the hyphen key, you get a hyphen, in Chinese 连接号. But sometimes you need a slightly longer symbol called the n dash. In Chinese, we call this 范围号. It goes from one to another, right? So pages 51 to 77, you are not connecting 51 and 77. You are saying start at 51, go to 77. It's a range. 是个范围. And then the longest one, the M dash, in Chinese we call this 破折号. And its function is to break up the grammar of a sentence. This is one of two cheat codes in English grammar. If you're not sure about your grammar, add an M dash and you can start over. The other cheat code is the semicolon, 分号. I'll talk about that later. So let's jump into the details. A hyphen is used to connect two things, usually a compound word, like in this case, eagle-eyed, an adjective, which means someone has very good eyesight. In Chinese, 鹰眼. Or sometimes some prefixes also need a hyphen. So the example here is pre-war, which means before the war. We usually don't see a version without the hyphen. The hyphen is part of this word. So you can type this hyphen by hitting the hyphen key or hitting the minus key on the right. The second one is the n dash. As we said, it gives you a range. But also, if you have a compound word that is not that looks like two words, and then you need a hyphen, the hyphen should be an n dash. So the example here is civil war, 内战. This is one word. It looks like two words, it is one word. The Civil War, it is one thing. So if you need to say pre-Civil War, if you simply use a hyphen, then it looks like pre-Civil War. That's not what you want. You want pre-Civil War. So in this case, you would use an n dash to let the reader know that you are modifying the entire thing, not just the first part. How do you type this in Microsoft Word? There are two ways. Hopefully both of them work today. So the first way is, okay, I need to change the font. Sorry, hang on. Okay, the first way is Control plus minus. Hang on, why is the font not changing? There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the first one is Control plus minus. So this is Control here and minus. So this is the difference between minus and hyphen. It doesn't work if you hit Control plus hyphen. It only works if you hit Control plus minus. Another way, okay, so some versions of Microsoft Word, this does not work. If you hit Control plus minus, the screen will just get smaller. So the other way, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit confusing. The formula is letter space, hyphen space, letter space. So any random letter, space, hyphen, space, any random letter. Look carefully, space. It changed. Did you see that? It changed. Let me do that again. Any random letter, space, hyphen, space, Any random letter. Look carefully. Space. It changed into an N dash. And then because the N dash does not have a space in front or behind, so you do have to go back and delete those middle spaces. Okay, questions about the N dash? Oh, if you're using Google Docs, it's so easy. Just type 2 hyphens and it will turn into an N dash. I don't know why Microsoft has to make things so confusing. It's called an N dash because in the early days when they were setting type, 签字版, the dash was the same length as the letter N. 跟 N 一样长度. So the M dash is longer because in the early days, this was as the same length as the letter M. So let's look at the M dash. You use the M dash to interrupt the grammar of a sentence. There are two ways to do this in terms of grammar. The first way is, as in this example, you're simply cutting off the grammar and beginning again. So in front of this M dash and behind this M dash, the grammar does not match, and that's fine. The other way to use the M dash is as a very strong parenthesis. Let me give you an example. So this is how we add extra information in English. Okay. I do need to think of an example. Hang on. Okay. Okay, so here the main sentence is the teacher rarely, let's say, gets angry. And this middle part, the teacher is very kind. This is extra information. English has 3 ways to add that extra information. The first way is with parentheses. The second way is with commas, if I can get that comma there. And the third way is with M dashes. I'm also performing how to type an M dash. Okay, so in all 3 examples, this middle part is extra information. You can take it out of the sentence and the grammar does not change. But the 3 levels have different emphasis. If you use parentheses, you're telling the reader, by the way, just in case you didn't know, I wanted to let you know. If you're using an M dash or 2 M dashes, you're saying, you should really know this. This is actually quite important. And if it's somewhere in the middle, you can use 2 commas. No emphasis. So that's the second way to use M dashes in English. Okay, how do you type M dashes in Microsoft Word? There's like for the N dash, there are 2 options, but for the M dash, there's only 1 option. Letter hyphen hyphen letter space. Okay, so any random letter, hyphen, not the minus key, the hyphen key, hyphen, any random letter, space. Watch carefully. Boom, turns into an M dash. Let's do that again. Any random letter, hyphen, hyphen, any random letter. Watch carefully, space. Ta-da! So that's how you type an M dash in Microsoft Word. Once again, Google Docs has the better option. You just type 3 hyphens and you get an M dash. Actually, I keep saying Google Docs does this well. I should show you, right? Can we get a Google Doc without logging in? No. Okay, hang on. Okay, we have our Google Doc. 1 hyphen is a hyphen. 2 hyphens is an N dash. 3 hyphens is an M dash. Isn't that so easy? We really need to give some recommendations to Microsoft. Okay, back to this. There are 2 notes related to the M dash. The first one is here. NB is Latin for nota bene, which means note carefully. In Chinese, we will often explain something using the equivalent of an M dash, right? 用破折号来解释前面的名词. But in English, we don't use the M dash in this way. We use 2 commas instead. So, it's a different way of thinking about punctuation. The second note is that we have been talking about American English. There is one difference in British English. In British English, instead of an M dash here, they use an N dash with spaces. This is something American English does not do. So like in American English, the N dash has no space. And in British English, if you're using an N dash for a range, it also has no spaces. But in British English, instead of an M dash, you use an N dash with 2 spaces. Okay, questions about dashes and hyphens? Okay, next. Italics and quotation marks. So in Chinese, if you want to emphasize something, you would use quotation marks, right? 因中文打字的时候，你要强调什么，你会把它放到引号之间。But in English, instead of quotation marks, we use italics, 斜体, to emphasize something. So in this example, Taylor Swift's music is very good, right? This is in italics. So because Chinese doesn't really use italics, this could be hard for some native speakers of Chinese to notice. But for a native speaker of English, italics are very obvious. So you do need to practice noticing words in italics. The first use is for emphasis, but English also uses italics for titles of a complete work. So in terms of music, an album, 专辑, is a complete work. It is made up of individual songs, and when you put the songs together, it is one complete work. If you talk about literature, a book is a complete work. It is made up of individual chapters, and when you put the chapters together, you get a complete book. So the title of a complete work should be in italics. The title for those little parts in the middle, like a song or a chapter, those should be in quotation marks, right? So Lavender Haze is the name of a song. It's not the name of the album. So we put it in quotation marks to tell the reader that this is not a complete work. It is just one part of the whole work. The third use of italics is for internal thoughts. If somebody says something, you use quotation marks. But if somebody thinks something, you use italics. 所以内心戏、内心独白用斜体。And then there's also one detail. There's one detail that you may not see. Let me make this bigger. This comma 逗点 is also in italics. 它也是斜体逗点。Look, can you tell the difference? Let's see if you can tell the difference. Hang on. Let's make sure you can see this. This is italicized. This is not. Can you see the difference? 直体, 斜体. Okay, here's a harder one. Can you see the difference between a Roman and italicized period? This is Roman, 直体. This is italicized, 斜体. 直体, 斜体, 直体, 斜体, 直体. There is a difference. Nobody cares except me and the editor of books. But there is a difference. Okay, now, what if you need italics inside of italics? For example, the title of a book includes the name of another book. Or you're thinking about somebody thinking about somebody. You're thinking about somebody thinking something. What if you need italics inside of italics? The answer is to go back to Roman, 直体. I should also tell you the vocabulary. Hang on. So italics 斜体, Roman 直体. 不是那个直. Okay, so let's go back to this one. A. Okay, so in this example, she is looking at a dog. She's thinking at a dog. And she's thinking that the dog looks like a dog that would sound like a cat. Meow. Instead of a dog, woof. So she's thinking that the dog would say this. Okay, maybe that's a bad example. I should try to think of a better example. You look like a person that would think, I don't know, hi instead of hello. I'm just coming up with random examples. So she's thinking that this person that she's looking at looks like someone who would say hi instead of saying hello. Sorry, think hi instead of think hello. So this is the thing that this person is thinking, but this entire thing is being thought by this person. So it's a thought within a thought. It's italics within italics, so we go back to Roman. Or what about this book title? Interpretations of, that's not spelled right. Interpretations of Aristotle's Poetics. So Aristotle, 亚里士多德, wrote a book called Poetics, 诗学. But this book is not that book. This book is somebody explaining that book. So the title of this book is in Roman, but the title includes another title, sorry, in italics, but the title includes another title, and the title within a title goes back to Roman. Are you all thoroughly confused yet? Okay, good. So that's italics. The other half of this PowerPoint slide is about quotation marks. In American English, we use double quotation marks. But if you have a quotation within a quotation, you're saying that somebody said something, you would go to single quotation marks. Right? So, hi, he said, and then she replies, did you just say hi? So here we have single quotation marks because she is quoting him, but I am quoting her, quoting him. If you need a quotation within a quotation within a quotation, you go back to double. You alternate, right? Double, single, double, single. This is American English. For British English, flip. The first level is single quotation marks, and then the second level is double quotation marks, and then we go back to single. One other thing, okay, so the next use of quotation marks is for special meanings. I think this is why Chinese uses quotation marks for emphasis. If you see a random word inside quotation marks, the person is using that word in a different way. So because they often tell you that the meaning is different, you have to pay attention. A common name for these quotation marks is scare quotes. When you see them, you might get a bit scared. You don't know what's going on. So the example here is literature scholars use the word irony to mean something different. So here we're not talking about the idea of irony, we're talking about the word irony. And the author is now going to explain the special meaning of this word for literature scholars. In British English, well, I shouldn't say British English. Some American writers have started doing something. Instead of double quotation marks for this usage, they use single quotation marks for this usage. So if you read something in American English and then one word is surrounded by single quotation marks, that means that the author is using scare quotes. The author is not actually quoting somebody talking. And then the last meaning we mentioned earlier is the title of something that is part of a complete work, but is not itself a complete work. Okay, questions about this page? Yes. Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. I should talk about quotation marks in terms of sentence punctuation. Okay, yeah. So here we go. In American English, um, if the quoted sentence ends with a period, the period always goes inside the quotation mark. Always. There is no logic to this rule. You just always put the period inside. If the speech tag, this is the speech tag, it tells you who's talking. If the speech tag comes after the quoted sentence, it is still part of one sentence. It is one sentence. So you can't have a period, because if you add a period, it becomes two sentences. Instead, we change this period to a comma, but the position is the same. Always inside, always inside. It gets more confusing if it is not a period. So for example, if this guy is kind of confused, he's like, hi, not sure what's going on. Um, if this question mark is part of the quoted sentence, it's telling you that he sounds confused. It goes inside. But here, it is not part of this quotation, right? He did not sound confused here. So uh, this is part of her question, not part of his sentence. So the question mark goes outside. So this is more logical. You have to think about, does this punctuation belong with this quotation? Same thing goes for any other kind of punctuation inside or out near quotation marks. So like, okay, again, I'm really bad at examples, but for every other punctuation mark that is not a period or a comma, you have to think, does this punctuation mark belong with the quotation or does it belong with the entire sentence? So, okay, let's say he replies, yes, I did. If you only have two people in a conversation, you don't need a speech tag for the third one because there's only two people, right? One person, A says this, B says that. The third line, therefore, goes back to A, right? He said, she replied, and so this is him. Let's say you want to add the speech tag in the middle. This is how you do that. Hang on. A. The quoted parts are one complete sentence, right? But I wasn't ready yet is one complete sentence. You are simply adding a speech tag in the middle. So this is extra information. It follows this rule. Two commas tell you it is extra information. Now, the first comma goes inside the quotation mark because Americans don't care. You always put this comma inside a quotation mark. And then the second comma comes here. But it's two commas telling you this is extra information. There are no periods in the middle. This is one sentence. There are no periods. And then here, she is shouting. So the exclamation point goes with the quotation. When I'm telling you that she shouted, I'm not shouting. She's shouting. So this is her exclamation point, not my exclamation point. But if I said, now this is my sentence, and therefore this exclamation point is my exclamation point. Okay, Gabrielle, does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, great. So as I said, this is American English. If you are using British English, the rule for this period is reversed. You always put it on the outside for British English. Uh, Same for this comma. In British English, you always put it on the outside. British people are weird about punctuation. They don't really care. They just do whatever they want. So we don't really have to talk about British punctuation. Okay, let's take a short break. And when we come back, I will keep trying not to confuse you too hard. Okay. Okay, the next thing. If you use quotation marks, the thing inside the quotation marks must be exactly the same as when you found it. But sometimes the grammar does not match your sentence. For example, what if you are writing in the past tense, but your quotation is in the present tense? Then you need to change some words. How do you change words? Using these two things. You can add words with square brackets. So, for example, in the original sentence, it says raising proficiency and efficiency. If you want to add the word the because you think it's a mistake, you need to add it, you can put the inside square brackets to tell the reader that this is something that you added. It is not part of the original quotation. In Chinese, we simply use parentheses, 小瓜. But using parentheses has a problem. What if the quotation already has parentheses? 如果你的引文里面已经有小瓜怎么办? How can you tell the reader these are the original quotation, but those are mine? You can't. So English solves this problem by reserving the square brackets exclusively for the editor of the quotation, for the person giving you the quotation. What if you need to take away some words? Then you would use the ellipsis. An ellipsis looks like 3 periods. It is not. So in the original quotation, it says proficiency and efficiency of the students. If you want to take out and efficiency, you would replace it with the ellipsis. An ellipsis can skip any length of text. You can skip one word, you can skip 2 words, you can skip 5,000 words. Doesn't matter. Now, an ellipsis is not 3 periods. Let me show you. This is 3 periods. This is an ellipsis. It's 3 periods and 4 spaces. Spaces matter. If your ellipsis comes at the end of a sentence, so for example, if you want to end the sentence here, efficiency of the students, and you want to skip these 3 words in language learning, you would say like, you would be, first of all, I'm omitting the first half of the sentence, efficiency of the students, and then you begin with a period, and then you add the ellipsis, space, period, space, period, space, period. So if it comes at the end of a sentence, it now looks like 4 periods, but in fact, it's 4 periods and 3 spaces. Questions? Okay, there's one last slide. Do we have to talk about this? Nah, that's fine. We can skip this. Okay, so those are the more complicated parts of punctuation. Now we can go back to the basics. Let's talk about individual punctuation marks. Period. The period comes in 2 places. 1, at the end of a sentence. 2, to shorten abbreviations. Like, Mr. and Mrs., right? Well, how about saints? Saint Patrick. 圣派翠克. Or how about street names like Sunset Boulevard? How about what other, like Catholic Church fathers, 神父, Father Thomas, right? So periods are used for abbreviations. By the way, did I tell you this before? The plural of Mr. If you have more than one man, you can say Misters. This is Misters. It's from the French. But if your abbreviations are an acronym, so like the UN, then you don't need periods. Okay, so there's a difference. These are abbreviations, 缩写. Well, I guess in Chinese it's the same. These are acronyms. An acronym is when you take the first letter of each word. An abbreviation, you just make it shorter. But an acronym, you take the first letter of each word, like NATO. What else do we have? Asian. Asian is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. 东南亚国协. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. 北大西洋公约组织. Now, you will notice for the UN, 联合国, United Nations, I added the. The rule here is if you can say the acronym like a word, you don't need to add the. So NATO, not the NATO. But it would be really weird to say the UN. We say the UN. So if you have to spell out the acronym, you add the. There's one trick. There's one exception. The World Health Organization is not the WHO, or is not WHO. We say the WHO. First of all, it sounds weird to say the WHO, but also another reason is because the WHO is a rock band. It's already been taken. So for the World Health Organization, we say the WHO. Okay, so those are periods. Let's move on to semicolons. 分号. We should do commas first, right? Let's do commas first. Commas, 逗点. In Chinese, you can add a comma wherever you want. It doesn't make a difference. In English, in American English, it does make a difference. You only add commas when you have to add commas, otherwise don't. So one place to add commas is if you move something around in the sentence. I got home late yesterday. This follows the expected sequence of an English sentence. You have the subject, verb, complement, adverb, and then the time, right? It's subject, verb, object, and then everything else at the end. If you need to move something, let's say you move the time, which is part of everything else, to the front, you have to add that comma to tell your reader you have moved something. It shouldn't be here. It should be at the end. But since it's here, add the comma. We talked a little bit about this when I was talking about however, right? However you do it. However you, okay, yeah, so however you do it, which means but you do it. However you do it means no matter what way you do it. So the comma is telling you important information. Another use of commas we talked about earlier, right? To set off extra information. These commas usually come in pairs, right? The first comma tells you the following information is not very important to the grammar. And then the second comma tells you, okay, that's the end of the extra information. Now back to our regular sentence. And then you can use commas for lists, like a grocery list. remember to buy eggs, ham, and celery. I don't know what you can make with these three things, but it's a list. Celery is a 芹菜. So it's item 1, comma, item 2, and I recommend you add this comma. It's not required, but if you read things in American English, most people add the comma. If you read things in British English, most people do not add this comma. So since we're learning American English, I recommend that you add this comma. This is called the serial comma because you are making a series of things. 一系列. It's also called the Oxford comma because of some strange reason. Okay, so those are commas. Now we can talk about semicolons because semicolons, look, it's a period on top of a comma. It can do the work of both things. If you have two sentences, yeah, and these two sentences are related in some way, you can use a semicolon to connect them. So each sentence has to be a complete sentence. You cannot use semicolons for parts of a sentence. Now, I said earlier that semicolons are a grammar cheat code because you can use as many as you want. Each of these is a complete sentence, but they are related in some way. And so if you want to let the reader know that they are related, you can turn those periods into semicolons. And you can use as many as you want. The other use of semicolons is if you have a list of lists. Your list includes lists. So, for example, um, let's say I'm reminding you to go to 3 different stores. The first one is a supermarket, so you buy food. The second one is a stationery store, 文具店, so you buy stationery. And the third one is a clothing store, so you buy clothing. This is a list of lists. I'm using the semicolons to separate each list. You can, of course, just say, remember to buy eggs, ham, celery, paper, pencils, glue, shirts, pants, and shoes. But that's kind of long. This is a more graceful, grammatical, logical structure. Those are the only 2 places to use semicolons. If you see someone using semicolons in a new way, that is wrong. Question so far? Okay, we're almost done. We have, how many symbols do we have left? I think it's one last symbol. That is the colon. Yes. Yes. So I say this because for some reason, native speakers often have trouble with semicolons. They'll use them randomly and wildly with no regard for grammar or logic or beauty at all. So I'm just reminding you, these are the only 2 proper uses of the semicolon. Okay, colon, 冒号. we use these to explain. The thing after the colon should explain the thing before the colon. Now, most people use a lowercase here. Either one is fine, but the grammar that I learned is if the thing after the colon is a complete sentence, use a capital letter. If the thing after a colon is not a complete sentence, use a lowercase letter. But if you only use lowercase all the time, that's also fine. Okay, so just as a brief side note, you can like take a break while I tell you about some punctuation history. These four symbols in British English were originally doing the same thing. Comma, semicolon, colon, period. In British English originally, these four symbols had no grammatical meaning. They told you how long to wait before you continue reading the sentence. So a comma is a very brief pause. A semicolon is a slightly longer pause. A colon is an even longer pause. And a period is a long pause. And this is because language is primarily spoken. We learn to speak before we learn to write. So in the early days of English punctuation, typesetting, when you had to make standard punctuation, the British used these four symbols to tell you how long somebody would wait before they continued. And in terms of grammar, that the period happens to match with a complete sentence. And the comma happens to match with part of a sentence. It's the middle two symbols that don't really fit grammar as we understand it today. So that's why if you read things from like the 19th century or earlier, you might see people using the colon and the comma, or the colon and the semicolon in weird ways. Those are not grammatical symbols, they are rhetorical symbols. 不是文法标点，是修辞标点。It's not telling you the relationship between parts of a sentence. It's telling you how long you should pause before you keep reading. Okay, last thing today, we're going to talk about uppercase and lowercase. So okay. Capital or uppercase letters versus lowercase letters. In English, there are two systems. The first system is just regular when you're reading something. Capital letters are for the first word and proper nouns. A proper noun is a noun that refers to one unique thing, not one kind of thing. So, names. A person's name is a proper noun because it's always referring to one person. The name of a brand, name of a country, and also very important ideas. So like if you've ever read Donald Trump's tweets, he likes to use capital letters to tell you he thinks that this is a very important idea, like truth or like fake news or something. But it's always the first letter of the word. If you use all capital letters for the whole word, it means that you're shouting. And it's usually for online typing. If you're shouting in a book, you would use italics for emphasis. But because you can't add italics on Facebook or Twitter, therefore instead we use capital letters to show emphasis. Everything else is lowercase. So that's the sentence system. But then we also have the title system. For titles, English follows the German practice of capitalizing nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and the first word. So, for example, and then all other words are lowercase. You might be thinking, what else is there, right? We have all the parts of speech, right? No, no, no. There's also prepositions, conjunctions, interjections, articles, like the smaller parts of grammar. So, for example, we had a book title earlier, right? Interpretations of Aristotle's Poetics. So you will see of is not capitalized. It's not a verb, noun, adjective, or adverb, or first word. And then after a colon, you might have the subtitle. New readings of a classic text to help you sound more beautiful in everyday life. For example, so this word, oh, okay, hang on. The best new readings. Okay, so this word is capitalized because it is the first word of the subtitle. The is not a noun, verb, adjective, or adverb. It is the first word of the subtitle. And then we have adjective, adjective. Oh, sorry, I guess, yeah, it's adjective. Noun, lowercase is preposition and article. Adjective, noun, preposition. Verb, noun, verb, adjective, or adverb, adjective, preposition, lowercase, adjective, and noun. So it's nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and the first word are capitalized. Everything else is in lowercase. Questions? Okay, and then just for fun, English also has a thing called small capitals. 小型大写. Ta-da! The letters are capital letters, but their size is a lowercase size. These are usually used for special effects. They're not used in daily life. But I just thought they were kind of fun. I wanted to share. Okay, that's all, all that I wanted to say this week. Any questions about mechanics? Okay, so next week is the final exam. Your homework is to finish the handout. And because next week is the exam, we won't have time to compare homework answers. I will give you those answers now. And if you have questions, please send me an email or a Moodle message or contact me before next week, and we can talk about your questions. Yes, the exam time is the same as class time. It will begin next week at 10:10, and you will have until noon to finish the exam. I want to remind you, after the exam, you're still not done. You also have to write course reflections. This is worth 20% of your total semester grade. And the grading standard is very simple. If you talk about something that is unrelated to the course in any way, like there's no possible way to connect what you're saying with our course, you will get 10 points. If you use, if I can tell that you just copied and paste from somewhere, or you copied from AI and you didn't do any changes, you didn't make sure the content is correct, that's 0 points. Otherwise, you get 20 points. But there is actually a question. It's not just whatever you want to say. Let me show you the question. Hang on. Write an essay in any language to convince me that from having taken this course, you have learned something meaningful. What you learned need not be limited to what was taught and can be inside or outside the classroom. The more details and analysis that you provide, the more convincing your answer may be. Mindless use of AI produces very unconvincing essays. So just to make sure you understand, I'm going to now translate this into Chinese. 写一篇文章，用任何语言说服我说，修了这堂课，你有学到有意义的事情。你所学到的事情未必是我教的事情，可以是课堂内、课堂外的东西都可以。提供越多细节跟分析，你的文章就越有说服力。如果你只是无脑的使用 AI，它的文章非常没有说服力。Okay? So that will begin after the final exam. It says December 26th, noon. That is when the final exam ends. And you will have 1 week till January 2, midnight. This is the autonomous learning, and it's also calculated as part of your daily grade, or it is your daily grade. Yeah, so that's 20%. And then if you feel like you want some more points or you need some more points, you can do this extra credit. There are some rules. You must follow these rules. And the deadline is, it says also January 2nd. Okay, here's the thing. So due to my own personal schedule, I may or may not have time to read your course reflections until next year. So the deadline says January 2nd, but you may not be able to see whether you need extra credit before January 2nd. So in fact, this is more like a reminder. The real deadline, let me show you, the real deadline is January 13, midnight. It's 13 because I have to submit your grades by January 15. So if you can, try to submit it before January 2nd. But if you can't make it, you can submit a late submission. Moodle will take your submission all the way to January 13. If you're not sure whether your extra credit successfully follows all these rules, you can email me a draft and I will give you some general comments. Okay, questions about any of that? Great. Okay, so that's it for this semester. Good luck next week.